Hello and welcome to the Spooky Chris podcast. My name is Chris Ringler. I am an author. I'm an author, filmmaker, occasional artist, and all-around ne'er-do-well. You can find out all about me at spookychris.com. Hopefully you found me that way, miraculously. I don't know how. That's where all of my blogs, podcast, and everything awesome is located. Once upon a time, friends. So I live in Flint, Michigan. And I have talked about Flint many, many times if you've listened to this before. If not, I have lived in Flint, we're getting close to 20 years, which is so surprising, so strange. I came to Flint kind of an accident. I was a mall rat after I got out of high school, and in the 90s, when my closest friend started becoming ingratiated into the downtown Flint culture, there was so we have a theater called the Capitol Theater. It's an old style, Italian style movie theater, and it went into disrepair and became a venue for concerts and hall shows. And we would hang down there a lot, and through us going down to hall shows and stuff down there, we met a bunch of new folks. I guess that started my mall ratness. It's because we were younger and needed some place to go. We'd hang out at the mall and then go to the downtown. But that's where I started to get involved in downtown Flint, was back in the 90s. And so, going to college and all these other things, you make all these other friends. And I had somebody I had met from downtown had seen me and another friend who rented from this guy out walking around, and he wanted to know where I was living. And I, at the time, was living in a small town called Mount Morris, Michigan. It was my first apartment. I basically looked at it on a Wednesday and was in there on a Sunday. I'd reached an age and a time where I was ready to go. I moved out late, and it's for the horror stories you hear of starter apartments, it was pretty decent. I have very fond memories of the time there, just some sketchy folks, because it was, a sketchy area as it turned out. But I had started to get to know people, through other friends downtown Flint, started to get involved in the arts scene in Flint at the time. And, moved downtown in 2005 and have lived in and around Flint since. But that was about the time that I really started to get involved with the art scene in Flint. And art was a big part of my life then, and a big part of downtown. Flint is an interesting city in that it's a city. We have under 100,000 people here now, but it's big enough that you can, our big car show that they do every year, called Back to the Bricks, that brings on non-COVID times, that'll bring about 500,000 people to our downtown to look at classic cars, which is just incredible. But we're a small enough place that you can make an impact with the arts in general. It's not like going into a city like New York or Detroit, even or even mid-range cities like Grand Rapids or Ann Arbor, where there is an established hierarchy and market. We have established galleries here in Flint, but it's not the same as you would see in big cities. We don't have kind of the big city artist scene, where you're seeing art going for multiple hundreds of dollars and thousands of dollars, and just this elitism kind of thing. We're a very blue-collar art scene. That's changed to some degrees because of outside forces, but that's just how it works. You build these things. Anybody who's ever worked any grassroots thing, once you make it viable, once you kind of get the rocks out of the ground and till the soil and kind of show that you can grow something, someone else is going to want that plot of land. It's valuable now, and they're going to want to grow something themselves. That's just how it works. It's good and bad. That was always kind of my thing with the horrors group that we have, is that the hope was that you'd see more horror kind of things and more arts and culture things pop up because of our being there and our successes and everything. But you also get bummed out in case that ever happens, which it never really did in our case. Somewhat, I guess, but it's also a bummer because you're not the only one doing it anymore. But I'd gotten involved in the art scene and in kind of an arts group back then. A bunch of it was started by essentially some hippies. It was started as a promotional group. A lot of people that were in bands, connected to bands, and around the arts, and they kind of wanted to get a group together to kind of like promote one another, promote their own stuff, and to kind of get that going. And as more people got interested and got heard about it, it evolved. It evolved into this arts group where you had poets and authors and artists and photographers and musicians and dancers and all these different designers all working together and coming together to put on shows in the area, from bar shows to concerts to gallery shows, poetry slams, all kinds of stuff. It was really great. And we did some amazing things. When you think of it was about as pure of an experience as you can kind of hope for, because none of us were, at least on the table, as it were. None of us were paid to do this. We were all doing it in our own time. That we were young enough that we could do this on our own time and in between work and life. Most of us all got along, and there was no real drama for a long time, really. And it was just a good time. It's one of those things that I think we underestimate the power of the arts and the power to bring us together. How it's such a big net and such a big blanket that everything can fit under it. The writers and poets don't necessarily have something obviously in common with a musician, but we did an event that was we actually did a few, but we did events where bands and spoken word artists would get together. I was involved in one of those, and it didn't go so great for me, but that's a different story. But it's neat. It was neat because it got you out of your comfort zone, introduced me to a ton of people and a ton of things that just opened my world up, that whole scene. We were asked, and I actually got a job doing after-school classes with kids because we were so involved in the arts and stuff. We were seen as kind of quote-unquote experts, and we were approached to do some classes and stuff, and it was great. Like I say, it was so easy and natural, and it was the best experience you can hope to have in that kind of a way. And it was just, I was in that group for a while, and as the culture of it changed, my interests changed, and I ended up dropping out and pursuing my own interests, which led to the horror group coming together. So when as I lived downtown, I lived in this building. It was funny because when I moved in, it was right downtown. I still have a friend that lives there. At one point, it was all friends. There was four apartments and an open first floor. It was empty, and we were all friends at one point. I got along, pretty much with most of the folks that have ever lived in there at the time. But at varying times, it was cool because it was all friends. And we had the opportunity at one point, because again, we had an open first floor, and we had an opportunity to start doing art stuff down there, art shows. And the first ones started very simply. It was me and my books, and a couple other people that we knew, and we just set up card tables and just opened the doors during the monthly. There's like a lot of cities do. There's an art walk and you kind of walk between the galleries and anywhere else. And this was early on. So at the time, way back when, there were 3 galleries, and it was the art walk was started by one of them, and basically you would go from one to one to one, and just wander through, kind of get your free wine and your free snacks, and you kind of go and just look at the art. I worked at a bookstore, and the woman that worked there, or that owned it, wanted to be involved. She had a big picture window, and the guy who became my landlord, like one time, he has all of these paint by numbers that he'd collected, and he did a show, he filled the windows with them. And we started doing art displays and music in our shop and that kind of stuff. And suddenly we were another venue on the art walk. And other people started to pick up on that too, especially when the arts group started really rolling. As we, bars wanted to be involved, other spots where you could kind of set up. The galleries were more established and had, kind of a vetting process to become a member and this and that. But these kind of other shows, they were very, hey man, like first come, first serve. Like whoever set it up, kind of ran it. It was whatever rules they had in place or whatever. But a lot of it was just kind of first come, first serve. You'd start seeing people setting up on the street in the park area, on the street, I should say, on sidewalks, setting art up. And it was really great. It started to get really chaotic and just great. It was like a pure experience. And we started doing these shows in the first floor of my apartment building. And it was, like I say, really easy. We did the first few, and it was very simple, like just us setting up. But as a few of us started talking, we started to get more ambitious. And the biggest advice I'd ever have for anybody in events or the arts or any of that is to make friends and get to know people. Whether you're someone who goes to conventions as a vendor or an artist or whatever. And this isn't just it's always good to have a network and have friends and have people to lean on and all that, the support. But it's also great because it opens doors that swing both ways. If you ever get in a position where you're doing a show, either putting one on or in a show, and there's an open slot, you start to think of people like, oh, what about so-and-so? That'd be great. They'd be great for this. And in turn, sometimes they will see opportunities and tip you to them. That happened a lot of times for me back in the past, where I did shows, and it was because I was tipped to them, and then you get to know people. We knew a young woman who was putting on shows at a bar, and then another kind of a barish venue. That inspired something else that I did later on, kind of a rummage sale kind of a thing. But you start to build these relationships, and you get inspired, and they, you inspire them, they inspire you. And you start to build a network. And we had built a network of really just solid people, but really just great artists. And so as we kind of get more and more ambitious, we would ask more and more friends of ours that are artists, like, hey, we have this whole downstairs area. Let's do an art show. Like, do you want to come and do an art show? And we had to figure out suddenly we were putting on events. It wasn't just a handful of us putting out card tables. It was, okay, we got to clean the space. We got to get this. We got to get that. Like, are we going to have snacks? Are we going to have a DJ? Are we going to have a band? It became more and more ambitious because we had kind of an open canvas, and with, within parameters, we could do whatever we wanted, and it was amazing. And it was just like, it was crazy because we were just like, oh gosh, like we can do this, we can do whatever. We started to do bigger and bigger shows. I remember we had a DJ at one of them, and we had, like I say, a band, and it was great because we were just all so inspired by one another, and we were able to start bringing in people from out of town. And that was our big thing, is we wanted to bring in folks that were not from Flint. The idea being that you want, to me, for this kind of a thing, success is not to keep showing your art in the same city to the same people over and over again. Success is to get beyond your city in town into other towns and other cities and other galleries, so you can get more eyes on it, so you can get sales, so you can get leads, so you can get other shows. That's the point, and that's kind of why you help other folks along the way, is that you're trying to extend your reach. And it's I'm not one to believe in karma, but it's in that weird way, it is good karma to just do unto others. So what I'm getting towards. So a bunch of us that had done these shows and had been involved in the arts and stuff got together and formed this kind of a group, kind of a coalition, and we were gonna. We'd started doing more and more of these shows. We called them guerrilla art shows. GUERRILL, guerrilla. The idea in that these were loose format, very free form, not. We did not jury people in. We asked friends. We did not dictate what they brought. We did not dictate prices. We did not make a dime off of these shows. This was a free space with friends just doing art shows. It was a guerrilla thing because we were taking over a space and just throwing up an art show on one night, and that was it. So we did these guerrilla art shows, and this group formed as the Guerillas. Of 625. That was the name, the street number for the building. And we started talking, like, okay, we want to do this, we want to do that. Like, they started. It was, at the time, it was very silly in how much I think there's a point of, like, we almost did too much work. It became too structured, I think, and that, so it ended up kind of blowing up in our faces eventually. And I think it was in retrospect, I think it's one of those where I wish I would have just kept the reins of it in the hands of just a couple of us. But the idea was like, well, shoot, this person knows these people and can do this, and that person, this guy is going to make us a website, and this guy can do promotions, and this woman is going to help with this and great, and we were all friends, and it was again, it was just a bunch of people working together to do these things. It was very small at the time of the show I'm going to kind of talk about, but we got a little too big for our britches, unfortunately, and it blew up in our face, as life does sometimes. But so we started building this art show, and we it was a bunch of our locals. It was. We had our art there. My now wife was doing tarot readings. I had a bunch of friends from Detroit that came out, and some other folks that from out of town. There was an artist that we had started. We kind of inspired him to get back into art, and he's an art teacher now, which is amazing. He does great paintings and stuff, and he's a super good guy. And he had, I liked his paintings when I'd seen them, and I kind of bullied him into doing our show, and that kind of lit the fire under him, which was great. And so we put together this show for an art walk, and it filled the whole downstairs area. I mean, gosh, and it was hard to tell, but we would get like a couple hundred people in there, and during these nights, if not more, like it'd get packed. And this is just people milling about, hanging out, like. The cool thing about our art walks is, again, the Flint art scene, pretty much everybody knew everybody, so it was just friends kind of like, oh, hey, how are you? Looking for each other and seeing each other and kind of seeing all this art. And we had art there. We had, the tarot. We had photography. We had clothes for sale. Just a lot of great stuff. One of our friends she made handmade monsters, and she sold those there. And just it was a great scene and a great vibe there. And it was, such a big show. My folks even came out. My parents are even then we're talking. This would have been 12 years ago, something like that, 12 or 13 years ago. So they were still it would have been in their late 60s, early 70s, older. So they came out to see everything, and it was great, and it was really a fun time. So at one point, I would, the way I do shows is I will kind of wander around and kind of make sure everything's going okay, and I kind of just check in on people and say, how's everything going? Is everything okay? This and that. So I'm wandering around, and all of a sudden I see a bunch of people dressed as zombies as they kind of come into the place and start bumping into people and acting like zombies. And I was just kind of dumbfounded because I didn't understand what was going on. And as they'd gone around, they were throwing newspapers at people. These kind of oversized tabloid style newspapers. They threw one at my now wife, and she had a candle burning, so like that was kind of dangerous. They bumped into a lot of people. Like I said, they bumped into Art. I managed to see as they were leaving, and it was all kind of, I wish I had better instant reflexes where I could react better at the time, but I was just dumbfounded. I didn't understand what was going on. And this guy, it was dressed as a zombie, was standing, and I recognized him as someone I briefly worked with, and a local guy that was part of a local like a alternative newspaper. And he was at our door, and he unfurled this big sign with fake money in it, and like flapped it out. He was trying to unfurl it in our building, and I grabbed it, and we had a kind of a tug of war. And like it was one of those things where I started getting like Ralphie, like feelings of like I'm going to get this guy on the ground and I'm going to punch him until I don't have fists anymore, until like someone stops me. And I managed to get him outside into like our entry into the building, and he unfurled it, and it's this stupid pretentious sign. And again, all of my editorializing you'll have to forgive because I can only tell my side of this. So, to me, it's pretentious. It said art's not for sale, and it had all this fake money in it. And I just was seeing red, and I ran across. It was great because I ran across next door to like this T-shirt shop that I worked at, and I told a guy I know that I'm friends with, and I'm like, oh my god, this guy is littering out there, and I know this guy, and he's my friend, and he's that if anything was going to make him mad, that would make him mad. So he ran out there and like shooed the guy away, and like we kind of got the whole thing, like the whole mess of everything, and like threw it away. And they were like kind of throwing, like there was fake money everywhere because it kind of blew away around everywhere, and we were just dumbfounded and outraged and didn't know what the heck had gone on. And we learned a little later that this alternative newspaper, they considered themselves quote-unquote guerrilla news, and they took umbrage with us calling ourselves a guerrilla art show. I don't know why one person can use the word guerrilla and not another. That's not for me to say. That's above my pay grade. It was a super weird flex though. But they had taken umbrage, and I supposedly, from what I'd been told along the years, is they had gotten calls from folks like wanting to know where the art show was. Where's the Guerrilla Art Show? And like we're asking them, and they just kind of got fed up with it, and they decided, hey, we are going to protest this with a zombie protest, a zombie flash mob protest. So they got a bunch of their people together, and they met at some spot, did their makeup, and they marched down to our place. Unbeknownst to us, we didn't. This was a one-sided argument, kind of, because we didn't have any issue with them. We didn't care about them one way or t'other. We just did our thing, and they came down, and then they went through our art show dressed as these zombies, and they were throwing their newspaper at people, like not like like tossing them kind of sideways, like a side toss. I don't want to make it sound like they were throwing them aggressively in people's faces. They were throwing them kind of as you would a newspaper, at people and into the little spaces where art was and everything. And then they kind of retreated, and then I guess the whole point was the guy was going to unveil this big banner that said "Art is not for sale," because I guess we were all sellouts of some sort because we were selling art. How that works, I don't know, because if you have, and they had that newspaper, and they sold advertising, because that's how you exist. I don't understand. I've been a starving artist for my adult life. The romanticism behind it is ridiculous. You can keep your integrity and still make money. While integrity and vision can be sold, the foolhardy idea that